everyone, I'm Bandish, the founder of The Curious Mindset, a private community for technology leadership teams powered by 64 Tech, an IT solutions provider of hardware, cloud, and IT services. While 64 Tech powers this community, our guiding principle is always to give more than we take. Rest assured, you won't be bombarded with any sales pitches. Please do follow our dedicated LinkedIn page for any updates on how 64 Tech can help with technology challenges or shake up things with your IT suppliers. Now, 64 Tech provides technology solutions. However, some of the biggest challenges tech leaders face are human and not technical. As leaders, there's often pressure to appear all-knowing, which makes it hard to admit what we don't know or ask questions that allow us all to be vulnerable. The Curious Mindset was created to help us build the essential people and leadership skills we didn't know we needed. This community grew out of my own experience and my desire to help others overcome the challenges I faced when I became a leader. I know firsthand how isolating leadership can be, and our North Star here is that no one leads alone. At 64 Tech, the mantra is together we grow, and the Curious Mindset is how we can make that happen. This is a space for us to learn, to share, and to grow more confident as technology leaders. Our mission: to help technology leaders become the best versions of themselves. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our host, Andy McMenemy, our technology leader co-host, Steve Maxwell, and our special guest, Jon Davies.
Bandish, thank you so much. Absolutely delighted to be back with you all, guys. And Bandish, once again, on behalf of the whole organization, thank you. Thank you, Michelle, and also 64 Tech for the generous way that you support this community and have done for the last 5 years. And that generosity was never more evident than last month in the face-to-face event in London at Langhams Brasserie. I'm fairly confident everybody that was there thoroughly enjoyed the hospitality and learned some amazing things on leadership from the community speakers that were there, Stephen Shaletsky and Gerald Ratner. So we're back virtually, and today I've got the very great pleasure of introducing you to the other half of the Lisa Davies and Jon Davies partnership, that are the Managing Director and Chief Inspirational Officer at Get the Edge UK. Now, I've worked with Jon and Lisa since, crikey, 2011 now. It's getting longer and longer. And it's fair to say that, I've thoroughly enjoyed that journey. But more importantly, I've probably learned more about leadership from Jon than I ever learned in any other environment in the time that I've worked with him. He's an absolute mine of information, but not only just a mine of information, it's practical and it's at the cutting edge of everything he does. Jon, on a weekly basis, is absolutely delivering top-level leadership for directors, managing directors, and groups of organizations, and it's been my privilege to work with him. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce you to Mr. Jon Davies. Jon, welcome to The Curious Mindset.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you, Bandish, for inviting me, and welcome, and great to see you all. Thanks very much for having me. I'm really excited about working with you all today, and actually hearing some of the questions as well that you might have around beyond the topics that we're discussing, Andy. Yeah.
So, Jon, we know that business can be challenging at times, and we know that perhaps a lot of businesses in the UK are facing those particular challenges due to changes in the economy, changes in technology. And, as leaders, there are difficult conversations to have. There are difficult situations to face. That we still have, targets and performance metrics to meet and to guide our teams in those efforts. So when we think about sustaining performance, Jon, with limited resources, as maybe the budgets get tighter or the ability to hire good caliber people and find them, in fact, makes life a bit difficult for us. How can we lead with more clarity when things are uncertain, when the environment is uncertain, and where people perhaps are, looking for a bit of clarity? How can we lead with more clarity, Jon, as leaders?
I think, Andy, we're all in the same boat here, aren't we? We're all tasked to get more out of the business, to get, whether that more is more profits, whether it's improved KPIs, whether it's more out of our teams, more results, more engagement. We're always in that pursuit of more, aren't we, as leaders? And that can be really, really challenging. Now, when it's uncertainty attached to it as well, and also high challenge as well, then that becomes even tougher for us, doesn't it? Without a doubt. So as Bandish mentioned earlier, we're very much about people, aren't we? Everything we get through people. So this is really important then, that we have a better relationship with our people and bring that clarity for them. Yeah, in my book. So this is where leadership steps in, Andy, isn't it? How do you move your followers? How do you unlock that true potential that lies inside of everybody in order to be able to get you the more that's needed, if you know what I mean? So my starting point on that, Andy, I think, is to obviously have absolute clarity of vision, because when there is no vision, and there is definitely a lack of understanding, isn't there, without a doubt. So absolutely, can we nail our vision? Can we put it on a one-page plan? Can we share that with everybody? Can everybody absolutely understand where we're heading and why we're heading there? That's the first thing. Because when there's no vision, that's where storytelling starts. And story, because we're, as human beings, we're in the pursuit of certainty. When there's lack of certainty, what we start to do in our heads, we start to fill those gaps with imaginations and stories. And then, of course, we're heading off in the wrong direction. So as a leader, you can only ever perform at the speed of trust that you have with your team. So trust is a crucial part of what we've got to put together as well. Ambiguity, as we said it, when there's lack of clarity, ambiguity leads to confusion, anxiety, and decreased productivity, Andy, doesn't it? We know that. And when there's a lack of direction, team members can misinterpret that as a lack of strong and good leadership. So it's massively important that we bring that strong vision, real clarity around where we're heading, so that everybody knows what we've got. Now, the other thing we need when there's lack of clarity is connection. You need to have a higher level of connection with people, because you're asking people to do more than they're expected to do 9 times out of 10. And that needs connection with you, doesn't it? At a heartfelt level. And if you think about culture in a business, there's only 2 ways you can run a culture in a business, either a culture of love or a culture of fear. And if you're looking to draw more out of people, then you've got to have a higher connection. People need to feel loved, if that makes sense. Yeah. When you think about the opposite, who wants to work in an environment of fear? Yeah, because people will shut down, won't they, if there's no safety? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But we need to have that absolute environment where people feel supported and connected to you. And one of the best exercises I could encourage everybody to do that will help to position the vision in a way that works for each individual in your team to get the best out of them is to absolutely to understand each individual's value system. People will only perform in the workplace to the level of their values, how they see things. Our values, as we know, are our internal moral compass, aren't they? They guide us through to what's the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do. And if we understand a person's value system and what's important to them, then we can position our vision more expertly in line with them. And that's when we can craft a shared vision. And when we have a shared vision, we get stronger effort, more engagement, that kind of thing, especially when you're seen as a credible leader. And that would lead us into the next part of clarity. You've got to be seen as credible, because there's one thing we always say to great leaders, Andy, isn't it? And we say to them, whatever you do, if you open your mouth to commit something to somebody, be prepared to back it up, because if you don't do it, you lose your credibility, don't you? Yeah. So my solutions then to lead with clarity when uncertainty is high is to definitely start with the vision, reconnect everybody back into the vision, understand everybody's value system and what's important to them. And that way you can work on how to steer them into the vision more successfully. And then the communication is the next thing. We need to absolutely magnify the communication. Now, I'm sure many of you have implemented change projects back in the businesses, I would imagine. And you know, change is has an emotional attachment to it, doesn't it? And when change isn't communicated correctly or at the right level, people become fearful and don't want to participate in it. So you've got to be able to bring clarity around change would be to communicate again. And by the way, just when you think you've done enough communication, guess what I'm going to ask you to do again? Go again, communicate. So we've got to bring that change down into small areas. And when clarity is uncertain and you've got that uncertainty around change, I would be looking to try and find what we call our early adopters, those people in the business that can get you the result quickly. Yeah. Because what that does, it improves to what we call the herd. Those people who are sat in the middle ground here, the bulk of the people, that this change will work. And of course, it brings then that certainty that is needed to move people through that change program, especially when you get the early adopters getting you the quick wins and getting you the quick results. That shows that works.
I think that's a great point, Jon, because, you know, when we're trying to perform with limited resources, perhaps there's a hiring ban on, you know, perhaps we've only got a team that is worked to capacity and, you know, we're asking more of them. Sometimes that change from a leadership perspective can feel uncomfortable for us as well, can't it? And
yes.
As leaders, we know through experience of working with clients that the leaders that are willing to be vulnerable and explain that, you know, it is a significant challenge, but I see as being equal to the challenge, and you know, it's not easy for me either. It is a great way of building that trust, which you correctly identified as being so critical in developing credibility.
Yeah, change starts with us, doesn't it? And I guess the other thing we've got to help people understand is to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, because we're always, when we ever go to change something, we're always at the edge of our comfort zone, aren't we? So we've got to feel comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. The other thing when you communicate with people around bring that clarity, especially when uncertainty is high, is to make sure that you're very transparent about what is the known and the unknown. Yeah. Don't leave gaps for people. As we've already said, those gaps cause storytelling to take place. Storytelling destroys culture across a business. So the more clear you can be about what you're trying to achieve, where we're heading, where we are right now, of course, the more confident people will become. So absolute clarity. And again, like I said before, avoid making those promises, but make sure that you have continuous update for everybody, so everybody knows where we are and how we're moving.
And we know, Jon, we know from work that we've done as well that we sometimes know there are people that give us the corporate nod, don't they? You know, they'll agree with everything in the meeting, but then they're naysaying it behind, you know.
Yeah, down the corridors, they're stabbing you in the back, aren't they? Yeah. But that comes again from lack of engagement and lack of uncertainty, doesn't it? You know, if you've got those cynical team members, perhaps who maybe almost sabotage things, we've got to get connection back with them, and we've got to get closer to them and draw on their wisdom. Now, some interesting numbers, Andy, you know them. I don't know if anybody else would, but we'll share those numbers. We've done some research, haven't we, on engagement, and we know, don't we, that I'm going to give you three numbers, sorry, guys and gals out there. I'm going to give you the number 100%. I'm going to give you 63%. I'm going to give you 4%. Here's some of the challenges when we have uncertainty. Some of the people in boardrooms are so far removed from the actual work, it's untrue. And therefore, they only know 4% of the challenges that those people who have to implement the work will face. So they design all these strategies, they send them down through to the management team send them into the workforce, and the workforce deliver this stuff. And the senior leaders have not absolutely understood the challenges that the workforce will be facing. And hence, we've got some problems. Managers know 63% of the issues with the work that the senior leaders have designed and passed on to the workforce to execute. So they've got a problem as well. But the people who know the problems with the work are the ones who have to do it. And that's why we've got to get that greater connection where we work very, very closely with our team to design any issue, design any change, because they're the ones who are better pass the commentary that's needed. And of course, that requires us as leaders to show vulnerability, doesn't it? And recognize that we don't have all the answers, and invite our people into the platform to share what they think the solutions are. So good, honest communication is critical when we're working in that uncertainty. The other thing is to establish those non-negotiables, because there will be some things that have to be delivered, and you can't get away from that. And you've got to clearly define what those strategic goals are, those non-negotiables, and where there is little or no flexibility. You know, you've almost got to say, suck it up. That's what we've got to do. And now how are we going to get it done? And back into that coaching around that, you know, encouraging their feedback and commentary on, so here's what we've got to get done. What are your thoughts? How should we do that? And that requires us to step into democratic leadership. If you guys are familiar with that, we know, don't we? Democratic leadership is where everybody gets a vote. Everybody is consulted. Everybody is asked for their thoughts and opinions on how we should do something. And that's where great ideas come to the table. But, you know, democratic leadership is better and great in so many ways, because it allows everybody to hear the same message at the same time. It allows everybody to feel they have a voice. And that brings clarity and a great level of understanding.
We then earn the right, John, to have different conversations with them. You know, we can agree with them that the work may be uncomfortable, that the work may be very challenging, and that their limited resources mean that they're doing more apparently or perceivably for less.
Yeah.
But a phrase that I've heard you share many times is that it is acceptable to find parts of your task and your role that you don't enjoy, but it's unacceptable not to do them at the highest level.
Absolutely, Andy. Yeah, spot on. Yeah, that's a great supporting mechanism to defining those non-negotiables, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you will probably dislike some of the things I'm going to ask you to do, but in the situation we're in now, they've got to be done, and here's why, and bring that clarity to it. But you know, that also that democratic approach when there's problems, we must encourage you know, creative problem solving for sure, because the solutions lie within the people we employ. That's clearly the answer, isn't it? You know, you employ people because you recognize they've got skills, competence, and ability, and yet there's many leaders who don't go and consult those people on their thoughts or what we should do. So the other thing that will drive a greater clarity is the use of data and insights. I always class insight as information beyond the obvious. It's the little things that people don't know that we know. Yeah. And the more of that we can share, the better off everybody around us will be. Yeah. So that little insights. But data, of course, allows us to make rational decisions, doesn't it? It allows us to bring clarity to our thought process. It brings clarity to our objectives and goals as well. So the more we can leverage data, the better off we'll be, and share those insights into the team as well to increase the level of buy-in and understanding. So vision, Andy, connection. The other thing that we've got to bring is energy. I'm a great believer, guys and gals, energy pushed through people produces us results. And an energized workforce is going to achieve so much more than a team of people who are lethargic, negative, and cynical, as we know. And it's the leader's responsibility to bring that energy into the workforce every single day, isn't it? And, you know, I always talk about, Andy, about 3 phases of energy that we need to bring. We've got to think about, how do we get our team off to a fast start? That's the first phase. How do we get that power push midway through the day? And then how do we end up with a sprint finish towards the end of the day? And I think if we can bring the energy into our team, into our people, then we're going to achieve greater things, aren't we? And of course, we do that by management, by walking around. You know, many leaders are confined into their office, the door's shut, and don't actually get amongst their teams. Great leaders walk amongst their teams and to really check the culture, check the energy levels, and to help people and to explain, you know, the goals and the objectives and the why of the task. You know, Simon Sinek talks about sell them on the why and then teach them the how. And you know, I think that's something I've been living and breathing for almost 30 years, 40 years as a leader. Because the other thing that when we walk out amongst our people, we can check the energy levels, we can also enhance them. But what we also do is we give the opportunity to give people praise, don't we? Yeah. So I liken praise to encouragement to point to the North Star, if that makes sense. Yeah. So for me, when you give praise to somebody, what you're really doing is reaffirming that they're on path to the North Star. And the North Star is the goal and the vision, isn't it? Yeah. Because we're giving them that quality feedback that they're doing a great job in the right direction. So that's really, really important. We've touched on values, Andy, as well. And we must remember that values unite people. Yeah, values bring people together. And when we have uncertainty, values bring people together and helps align us again. Go for it, Andy. I got a question.
That's a brilliant point,
Yeah.
John. I'm just relating everything that you're saying now to the point that we're going to cover next, which is communicating with clarity, because it builds confidence. Now, in the face-to-face session when we were in London with Stephen Shedletsky, he talked about speaking up, but only ever to speak up to have an impact. And with all the change that's going on, the impact often that can be felt through the teams is that of through lack of clarity, as you said, can sometimes lead to a lack of feeling of psychological safety. So I just wonder, John, what your thoughts are on the importance of psychological safety in the workforce.
Well, psychological safety is a proven fact, Andy. Those businesses that develop psychological safety for their people or within their teams, within their people, are more profitable, get greater results, and are better places to work. So let's not mince our words here. This is crucially important stuff. An environment of psychological safety brings so much more into the business. So when there is no psychological safety, then people are fearful of making decisions, and that leads to risk aversion, reduced innovation, and people hiding behind the average, if that makes sense. Yeah. There's decreased morale and high levels of emotional stress. You'll find people will be less connected into the business, lower levels of engagement, lower profitability, higher levels of absenteeism, presenteeism even, yeah, where people are at work physically, but absent mentally, yeah. So psychological safety is absolutely crucial, yeah. And what psychological safety is, for those of you who may not have studied it or looked at it, is a culture, it's an environment where people can come to us with their ideas without fear of us critiquing those ideas. You know, the minute you say to somebody, well, that's a bad idea, that'll never, what a waste of time, you now make people small, and people won't put their head above the parapet again. And then, of course, we lose game-changing ideas, don't we? Game-changing information. So psychological safety is an environment where people can come to us with those ideas and feel that they can share them without any form of reprisal.
There have been a number of global instances where psychological safety wasn't the case, wasn't there, Jon?
Yeah, absolutely. And if we to think about some of those global calamities, as I call them, back in 2016, there's a gentleman called Ferdinand Piëch who was in charge of VW globally, and he created a culture of fear, so much so that the senior C-suite execs buried a lot of things from him. And of course, in 2016, the emission scandal emerged, didn't it? Where people were afraid to say, look, boss, we're in trouble here, we're making some mistakes here, because of fear of reprisal from him. Actually, what we call that, Andy, is impression management. We don't want to look confrontational to our bosses, so we hide this stuff. We don't want to look, what's the word I'm thinking of? Incompetent, Andy, that's the word. Yeah, so I don't come and ask you again, I'm sorry, could you just repeat that for me again? I didn't quite get it. And of course, then what we do is we go off doing our own thing, and we're not aligned, if that makes sense, to the real direction. So psychological safety is an environment where people can make small mistakes, and those mistakes.
Sorry, Jon, just to pick up on that point that we're talking about on a global scale, it's also cultural, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. An example of that one, Andy, is the Fukushima disaster, isn't it? Where the senior executive, so in Japan, you know, it's seen as disrespectful, isn't it, to perhaps challenge upwards, yeah, and challenge somebody's decision making, especially in the Japanese culture, from a subordinate. So, of course, when the Fukushima was built, it was inevitable that if any salt water got in to the reactor, it would blow the reactor up. And of course, when the juniors were looking through the plans, they could recognize some of this stuff, and somebody picked up on it and hid it because of the cultural approach. Yeah, you know, it's not acceptable. I can't go and tell my boss because I'm going to be in fear of losing my job, type of thing. And it got hidden, and inevitably it was drawn out by the press that you know, a senior person didn't listen, or should have listened to a junior person, but the person didn't feel safe enough, didn't feel strong enough to be able to go and challenge that person anyway. So that was a culture of silence. If your best people go quiet, we've got a problem. That's what I've always said. Yeah.
And I know you and Lisa are very strong advocates of active listening, aren't you?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so. You know, the big man gave us 2 of these, didn't he? So you get the best bit in stereo, don't you? Listening is a superpower, as I'm sure Lisa's already told you. But what listening does for us, it connects us into empathy, doesn't it? Because we can hear, can't we? We can hear people's challenges, we can hear people's issues. So if we think about psychological safety, people making mistakes, our job as leaders is to take inevitable mistakes, those inevitable mistakes of growth. Because whenever anybody tries something new, it's inevitable they're going to make a mistake at some point. You can eradicate, you can train, you can eradicate as much as you can, but there'll always be a mistake somewhere. And our job is to take those mistakes and turn them into learning moments, and that's where we come to the fore as leaders. That's where we get to do what we're really there to do, which is to coach, teach, fill the gap of knowledge, encourage, support. You know, let me ask you a question, guys out there. If one of your family members was failing did something wrong, made a mistake, you wouldn't sack them, would you? Yeah. Mind you, might have one or two of you might want to sack them, but Alex is borderline. Okay. But actually, what we should do, of course, is our job is to step in and teach, coach, and guide, isn't it? And mistakes are great because that shows me where the gap is in you. Yeah. And if I can see the gap in you, that's when I can go to work as a leader. Yeah. I can make you better than anybody else. So when there's no psychological safety, people are fearful of making mistakes because of the reprisal. So people don't do their best work. And yeah, so that would lead us then into an unsafe environment, which will enhance stress and well-being, as we know. So people will become more stressed and less resilient, if you like. Fear of criticism. So how do we go about building a psychologically safe environment? Well, we've always spoken about that open and honest culture, active listening with empathy. I'm a great believer you're hard on the problem when someone makes a mistake, but you go soft on the person. You kill people with compassion, don't you? You kill them with kindness. That's what we're there to do. Now, the same mistake, that might have to have a different conversation, mightn't it? Yeah, and we'll talk about that perhaps a bit later, how we have those more challenging, difficult conversations with people.
Yeah.
But yeah, build a culture of support and collaboration, I would say. And the best way to do that is peer-to-peer support. Yeah, mentor people up when they first start with those people who have the wisdom and the knowledge and the patience to teach. Yeah, get that buddy program going. And then, celebrate teamwork and collective problem solvings, not just in individual achievements. And then that emotional support, Andy. I think that's, what it sums to. I guess to sum psychological safety up, it's one simple question. Where would you prefer to work? In a culture that is fear, or is it love driven? Yeah. Now, if love sounds a bit fluffy, I'm sure, Lisa would be saying, and I would be saying, show appreciation then instead of love. That's fine. But I'm sure we'd much rather work in an environment where everybody is appreciated, wouldn't we?
And I guess I think you're absolutely spot on, especially in difficult times, when we are trying to sustain a performance, John, and we've got limited resources. That love can show up, as you rightly said, in praise, but also in celebrating the little successes during the day, right? Finishing the day with a celebration of what success we've had.
Absolutely. So that's why if we're walking around our business, Andy, we're looking for those quick wins, aren't we? Those small achievements, those things where we can pat people on the back and give them the praise again. Remember, praise is the glue. Praise is the glue. Praise is a strong emotion. It makes people feel good. And we're in the feelings business as leaders, aren't we? Our job is James Brown, isn't it? Make people feel good. Come on, I feel good. Want a bit of James Brown. Spread the love. Yeah.
Yeah, we often talk with the leaders when we're delivering leadership at a high level. We ask them, don't we, when they're walking around the business, are they the thermostat or are they the thermometer? What's the analogy with that, John, that we can share with the team?
Well, if you think about it, a thermostat sets the temperature and the thermometer reads the temperature. And our job is to be the thermostat, isn't it? And turn that temperature up. Yeah. Make it a great, fun place for people to work with challenges and excitement in the working day. And then catch people doing things right. That's what we're there to do, not to police everybody. Yeah. We're there to catch people doing things right and give them praise.
Which means we have to lead with that energy, and we've got to demonstrate what good looks like, don't we?
Absolutely. And that comes back to what we said earlier. Energy pushed through people is going to produce us a result. But we're probably going to have some difficult conversations, aren't we, at some point with some challenging, tough people, probably. But we need to do those with fairness.
That's a really good point, because, we are leading through difficult times. We are leading through change. We're leading through all of those aspects that make it very difficult. And sometimes we need to address underperformance. We absolutely need to praise consistency, confidence and competence. We need to find those times when people are doing things well, John, as you've rightly said. But it's also a case of how do we then have those challenging conversations when we need people to step up even more, or where we're observing an underperformance, John? What sort of frameworks can you share with us or help us with that would allow us to feel confident as leaders and having these challenging, courageous conversations that must take place?
I think the interesting thing, Andy, is the first thing we've got to do is manage our stinking thinking.
Exactly.
What do you mean stinking thinking, John? What I mean is the conversations we're having in our head. Yeah. When we know we've got to go and have difficult conversations with people, 9 times out of 10, our internal critic will start to feed us over-exaggerated examples of what may happen. Yeah. Okay. they will lose their temper, they will freak out, they will do this, they will do that. And of course, that makes those difficult conversations more restrictive, more challenging, and we feel less likely that we actually want to go into them. But what we've got to recognize is that those, when we navigate those emotionally charged conversations, we've got to do it with sensitivity and respect for the individual, haven't we? And just as you would do as a parent with your child. You know, as a father of 3 daughters, I've had to have some very difficult conversations, as you can appreciate, no doubt. Yeah.
But not going out wearing that.
Yeah. You have to have them, don't you? It's simple as. But you've also got the other challenge around conversations, which is balancing transparency with confidentiality and legal considerations. There's only so many things you can say, isn't there? So, you know, you've got to protect the business as well through this, haven't you? Yeah. Which is why, if you think about difficult conversations, you see most of them stem from some form of conflict somewhere, don't they? Whether they're between 2 people or whether it's a conflict with the workload. There's lots of different conflicts that take place in business, but conflict leaves clues. Yeah, before conflict is tension, and our job as leaders is to lean into tension, because if you lean into tension, you're probably never going to have difficult conversations if you do it properly. Yeah, and that's why if you think about frameworks, we'll talk about those in a minute, Andy, but one of the best frameworks is to have an end of month review. That's a framework of support. It also provides that legality that we were talking about as well, and protection for the business. So if you're a business that consistently has end of month reviews and you as a leader see them as a chore, then we're misreading it. They are really a strong framework for us. Yeah, because that's where we can give people the feedback. You know, so Andy, it's quite straightforward. If there was one thing I could share with you, Andy, about your performance last month, that may help us get greater results, may help us become more aligned, may help us expand the way we work together better. Would you want to know about it?
Absolutely, John.
Okay. Well, even if you found what I'm about to share with you quite difficult to hear.
Ooh.
Okay.
Now you've got me. Yeah, okay, go on then, tell me.
Okay, so what I've just used there is a process called inoculation, Andy, haven't I? So I've set myself up ready to have that difficult conversation, and my technique that I would use behind that would probably be something like what's known as the AID model. Yeah, and the AID model is an absolutely amazing model for giving feedback to people. It stands for action, impact, and do differently. Yeah. So Andy, when I saw you this morning with that customer, for example, just as I would say it, the customer had to walk all the way through the office to your desk, and you didn't even raise your head. You didn't give them eye contact or anything. It made me feel that they were really a nuisance to you. We didn't give them a warm welcome into the business. It made me feel like you really didn't want to talk to them. What do you think we could do differently next time that would give them a warm welcome into our business and make them feel very, very special? So if you think about what we've done there, I've given you the action, haven't I? The behavior I observed, what I saw you do. That's the important piece.
You've drawn attention to it, yeah. Yeah,
I've drawn attention to that piece of behavior. And then I shared with you the impact. And the impact, the way that we shared it just then, I stated, if everybody can remember, I said, it made me feel. That can never be challenged, can it? You can't turn around to me, Andy, and say, you don't feel that way, John, what are you on about? Yeah, so you're protecting yourself when you have those difficult conversations. It makes me feel.
Yeah.
And the do differently, in this example, we ended with a coaching approach, didn't we? What do you think you could do, Andy, to improve the situation next time around?
Yeah.
If we had to turn it into a bit more of a difficult conversation, I perhaps might not be quite as relaxed about it. I might tell you, instead of coach you through it, I might turn to a tell and tell you what I want to see happening. Yeah. So the AID model is a good example for handling difficult conversations with fairness, without a doubt. There's others. There's one called Spikes, which is another one. You can look that up, but it's quite straightforward. That's about setting the environment of what's happened, challenging perceptions, giving people an invitation to change, giving them some knowledge, showing some empathy, and summarizing as well. So there's many different SEB is another one. There's many different frameworks for handling difficult conversations, and we're in that great world now where you can go on FaceTube, type in anything you like, and it'll all come up, won't it? You guys know how to do that better than me. Yeah. So yeah, go and look up different conversations. Now, how do you prepare for it? I think you've got to consider the person that you're going to talk to. You've got to think about their personality type. You think how they might respond. Yeah. You probably need to make sure you've got the right environment for them as well. Sometimes these difficult conversations are best just having a walk. Yeah. If it's something a little bit more demanding, that's really more important, that has more consequence, then you might need to involve HR. Yeah, simple as. But the best ones are the ones that you have before you need to get to difficult conversations. Like I say, fireside chats. We've been talking about formal stuff, but you can have informal stuff as well. And the informals, 9 times out of 10, will solve the issues, won't they?
Yeah, John, one of the things I absolutely loved about delivering courses with you was when you start to talk about, we as leaders of teams, as leaders in organizations, we have got the responsibility of being guardians for their self-esteem. And so the way that we have those conversations should always be one that is absolutely drawing attention, but also uplifting in the way that we leave them feeling good about it, right?
Very true, Andy. Yeah, very true. As leaders, we have absolutely no right to damage anybody's self-image, have we? Their self-esteem. Life does enough of that for people anyway, especially when you think about the conditioning we receive on our journey from the various people that interact with us on our way. That can be very, very damaging for some people, can't it? They can be scarred with things. But of course, yourself, Lisa, and myself, we have the skill sets to eradicate and move that conditioning, don't we? The emotions behind that conditioning.
I remember a time when I was given very difficult news, having been headhunted into a PLC and then falling out of the redundancy process. And I remember the exit interview with my direct report, and he said very much these words, Andy, this is nothing to do with you personally. This is a commercial decision. And there are larger moves happening commercially across the business. And unfortunately, you're falling out of that process. This is nothing to do with you personally. Otherwise, we would never have hired you in the first place.
Yeah.
It's just an unfortunate set of circumstances. We're having to move the business to meet the current business climate. And this has been a strategic decision that's been made. And that left me, whilst I was incredibly worried, John, was as I drove away to go on garden leave, it gave me a great feeling of being, a high caliber person that was recognized and respected. But unfortunately, I was having to be made let go. Yeah.
You had a great reputation to live up to, Andy, didn't you? As described by the person. Yeah, and that's what we need to do, don't we? If we get to the stage where people have got to leave the business, they've got to leave with their heads held high, haven't they?
And dignity,
and dignity, because actually what we want is people to talk good about the business when they're outside of the business, don't we? So yeah, I think the piece on that one, Andy, is I think prepare thoroughly for a difficult conversation, anticipate emotions that might show up, and plan some of your responses that you can have. Deliver your message with clarity and empathy, but be very clear about. Remember, most difficult conversations are around changing behaviour. So you've got to be very clear on the behaviour that you've observed, and give the feedback as to why it's unacceptable. And again,
and of course, that has to be timely, doesn't it? It can't be 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's got to be timely, and that's where our values come in again, isn't it, Andy? As well, if you understand the person's values, you can share that back through it. Yeah. What I've recognised, Andy, is that if you think about performance, a proper performance praised is likely to be repeated, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? That's why we've got to catch people doing things right. But a poor performance left unchecked, guess what? That's going to be repeated as well, isn't it? Yeah,
because they don't know it's a poor performance.
Absolutely. So we've got to step into giving people feedback and be clear on the behaviours we want changed. Yeah. And the other thing you need is a strong sense of emotional intelligence. And we're very lucky in our businesses. We're one of only 3, aren't we? I think globally, to be accredited by the Institute of Social and Emotional Intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the ability to have self-awareness as to what's coming up in you. In other words, I've got to have a difficult conversation tomorrow and I feel really anxious about it. Because I'm anxious, that would tell me I'm not prepared enough. So I need to go back and prepare. So that awareness of those emotions are rising up inside of us. And then, of course, managing them, having a behavioral self-control. When people say something that irritates you or works you, or doesn't actually sit comfortably. But you've got to manage those emotional rising inside of you.
You can't blow your stack.
No, very, very much so. If you lose your stack as a leader these days, I think you've lost credibility. I really do. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be assertive and you can't be demanding. It doesn't mean you can't point out what has to happen. But actually, absolutely, behavioral self-control, you know, where we have fits of emotion, rages, if you like, I'd question whether you're a leader if you're using that as a strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the way that you explained that, John, by talking about the aid model, where you draw attention to the action that you want them to change, and then that kind of emotional validation for yourself, based it on how it made you feel.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about how it made you feel, you're quite able to have the conversation and ask them the questions about how they're feeling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads into the second part of emotional intelligence, doesn't it? The awareness of other people.
And the emotional validation, yeah.
And exactly. And then, to the ability to build those strong relationships with people. Adult to adult conversation is what we need, isn't it? Yeah. Remember what we said, it's hard on the problem, soft on the person. I love you, I just don't like what you do. Yeah.
Or the way you're doing it.
Or the way you're doing it. Yeah. And deliver that, with compassion. But those end of the month reviews are really crucial, Andy, because if you document everything in those, you're protecting the business legally from a legal standpoint if it should escalate. But you're also easier to put out little tiny fires, before they turn into wild raging fires. Yeah.
And that's a great point, John, because as Lisa shared with us, some of the younger generations coming through now, they need that consistent validation, don't they, to understand what the pathway looks like for them. Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And like I say, we're in the feelings business, and we have to give people that feedback, don't we? The three daughters we've got, Olivia, our middle daughter, she absolutely wants feedback from her bosses. She will leave a job if she doesn't get feedback at the highest levels. Yeah, because they're very much at her age. She's 30, she's 28, 30, something like that. 30, yeah. She would very much need that feedback to feel comfortable and confident and feel psychologically safe. And if she doesn't get it, she doesn't know. And then the stories kick in. Yeah.
Sure. And so how do we sum it up, John? How do we sort of bring it to a closure when we're having these conversations? How do we agree a method of kind of following up with them, I guess, because there needs to be some degree of follow-up, right?
Yeah, I think you've got to bring that clarity around the behaviors that you want to change. You need to have your milestones set, don't you? Your agreed check-ins. You need to help the person understand the behaviors that have got to be changed and why they've got to change them. Connect them you get them to commit to where they would like to go from here, rather than enforce it on them. How would you like to move this forward? When should we check back in? What help do you need from us? Yeah. What else could we do that would allow you to feel more confident in the work you do for us? Wherever it might be, whatever the issue was, you have to have those next steps clearly planned out, don't you? For sure.
You do, John.
Sure.
John, I'm mindful of time. It's been fascinating as always. I could listen to you all day, and I often do, and I thoroughly enjoy the days we deliver. And I know you could go down a rabbit hole on any of these subjects, and go into the nth degree of it. But you've given us a fantastic framework to work with right now. What I'd like to do is ask everybody to go to gallery mode, and I'd like Steve to step forward and perhaps offer you some of the questions that are coming through.